On Mars, the air you finally get to breathe would double as rocket fuel. The same oxygen keeping your lungs working could also launch you back toward Earth. That overlap is the real problem hiding inside every plan to live on another planet. A broken pump could turn into something more dangerous than any monster humans ever invented. One cracked seal could empty your bedroom into vacuum before you reach the door. Add a failed harvest to the list, and people could go hungry months before the next ship arrives. Mars won't forgive a mistake just because the person who made it was brave. Getting there was never the hard part. Building a tiny artificial Earth that never once stops working is. From a distance, Mars looks almost like home. Mountains, valleys, seasons, storms, and frozen water hiding under red dust. A Martian day runs only 40 minutes longer than ours. The sun still rises, shadows still swing, evening still falls over a landscape carved by ancient rivers. Of every world within reach, Mars looks like the one place humans were meant to try, and that resemblance is exactly what makes it deceptive. Because unlike Earth, Mars tries to kill you the instant you stop paying attention. Step outside without a suit, and cold is not your first problem. Mars's atmosphere is almost entirely carbon dioxide, at less than 1% of Earth's pressure. Your lungs find nothing worth breathing, and exposed liquid water boils away almost instantly. Without a pressurized suit, you wouldn't have minutes to fix your mistake, you'd have moments. The sky offers no comfort either. Mars has no global magnetic field and only a paper-thin atmosphere, so energetic particles pass straight through tissue and tear at DNA. Some of that damage shows up instantly. Some waits years to surface. In 2013, physicist Don Hassler's team turned an instrument called RAD, riding aboard NASA's Curiosity rover, into Mars's first radiation detector. What they found, a full round-trip mission would expose a crew to about 1 sievert of radiation, right at the safety limit most space agencies allow for an entire career. So a Martian shelter has to do more than hold in warmth and air. It has to work as armor against an enemy nobody can see. Then there's the temperature swing, near the equator. Mars can briefly feel almost mild in sunlight, yet the same ground can plunge past minus 100 degrees Celsius after dark. Thin air can't hold heat the way Earth's atmosphere does, so a warm afternoon can collapse into a lethal night within hours. Metal contracts, seals stiffen, lubricants misbehave in the cold. Comfort turns out to be the easy part. Keeping the whole settlement from slowly falling apart is the hard one. Then there's the dust. Fine, jagged grains that invade every mechanical joint, coat solar panels, scratch visors, and ride indoors on a boot. In 2008, NASA's Phoenix lander found something worse hiding in that dust. Perchlorate salts, discovered by scientist Michael Hecht, toxic enough to poison food or water if they ever got in. Nothing on Mars needs to attack you directly. It can simply let itself in, 1 grain at a time, and that's before anyone even reaches the surface. The journey itself takes a toll long before landing. A crewed mission would likely keep its astronauts away from Earth for 2 to 3 years, with launch windows set by the orbits of 2 planets. Miss the right geometry, and coming home on schedule may not be possible. Unlike a trip to the moon, no rescue could arrive within days. The ship itself would have to double as vehicle and prison. Inside it, the crew would share cramped quarters, recycled air, the same handful of meals, and a hum of machinery that never quite stops. Privacy turns rare, and tension has nowhere left to go. A disagreement on Earth usually ends when someone walks out of the room. Between planets, there may be nowhere else to walk to. Distance also rewrites what conversation even means. A message between Earth and Mars can take 4 to 24 minutes one way, so real back and forth becomes impossible. During an emergency, mission control could only weigh in after the crew had already acted alone. Every astronaut would need to become more self-reliant than any space traveler before them. That loneliness wouldn't come from silence. It would come from knowing Earth could hear you, and simply couldn't answer in time to matter. The body changes on the way there, too. In 2015, astronaut Scott Kelly spent 340 days on the International Space Station, while his identical twin, Mark, stayed on Earth as a genetic control. NASA's results, measurable bone loss, shifting gut bacteria, and a shift in gene expression that mostly reversed only months after he landed. Months in microgravity weaken muscles, thin bones, and scramble balance. Exercise can slow that decline, but never fully erase it. Astronauts stepping onto Mars after such a voyage would land already weakened, immediately asked to unload cargo, inspect habitats, and fix whatever failed while they slept. Mars offers only 38% of Earth's gravity, enough to feel lighter than the trip over, but nobody yet knows if it's enough to keep a body healthy for a lifetime. Gravity raises an even bigger question. Could a child grow up normally in a body that never weighs more than half of what ours does? No human has ever completed a pregnancy or childhood in partial gravity. Until that question has a real answer, a Martian settlement remains an experiment conducted on living people. And yet, parts of this have already been tested, and they work. Picture the first Martian homes, and you'll probably imagine glass domes glowing under a pink sky. Reality looks less romantic. Transparent walls make poor radiation shields, so early habitats would likely be compact, heavily armored, and half-buried, tucked under soil or inside old lava tubes. The safest home on Mars might resemble a buried industrial bunker more than a city under glass. Windows would stay small and rare. Most outside views would arrive through a camera instead. Inside, air would circulate through a fully closed loop. Carbon dioxide removed continuously, oxygen replenished without interruption, humidity held steady to protect both lungs and electronics. Waste couldn't just vanish down a pipe. Water from breath, sweat, and washing would be cleaned and reused again and again, while solid waste became fertilizer or a tightly controlled hazard. Every kilogram thrown away would represent material that had already crossed interplanetary space. On Mars, recycling isn't a slogan, it's arithmetic. Water is one resource. Mars may already be holding in reserve. Large amounts exist as ice at the poles and just beneath the surface, so choosing a landing site really means choosing access to water. Settlers could drill, heat the frozen ground, and capture the vapor. That water would support drinking, hygiene, farming, and radiation shielding, while electrolysis split it into oxygen and rocket fuel. But pulling ice from frozen ground is nothing like turning a tap. A contaminated well on Earth just gets replaced. A contaminated system on Mars could threaten the entire base. Air offers another resource hiding in plain sight. About 95% of the Martian atmosphere is carbon dioxide, useless until a machine starts pulling the molecule apart. NASA actually built that machine, a toaster-sized instrument called MOXIE, designed at MIT by scientist Michael Hecht, the same researcher who'd found Mars's perchlorates on Phoenix years earlier. Between 2021 and 2023, riding inside the Perseverance rover, MOXIE made oxygen from Martian air 16 separate times, producing 122 grams total at better than 98% purity, twice the rate its own designers expected. That's tiny for a person, but enormous as proof the idea works. A full-scale descendant could manufacture breathable air before any astronaut lands, and more importantly, brew the fuel that gets the crew home. Hauling that much oxygen from Earth would make a mission brutally expensive. Manufacturing it on Mars turns the trip from a visit into something closer to survival. The first crew would depend on cargo already delivered before they left Earth. Habitats, spare parts, food, vehicles, most of it flown in and assembled by robots working alone, tested before any human life was risked. Redundancy would decide whether the plan was responsible or reckless. One oxygen generator would never be enough, and backup power would need to survive the exact storm that knocked out the primary source. A successful base would slowly turn into a factory that happens to have people living inside it. Power would feed every other system, lose electricity, and heating, air, communication, and food production start failing together. Solar panels help, but dust storms can gut their output for weeks at a time. Nuclear fission could supply steady power through the darkness instead. The most reliable design probably wouldn't lean on any single source at all. Stored food eventually runs out, so greenhouses would need to supply fresh crops. But Martian soil is toxic with salts and needs treatment first, which is why early crops would likely grow hydroponically instead of in open fields. A single pest or nutrient imbalance could wipe out months of production, so diversity matters more than any one perfect crop. Beans, grains, potatoes, greens, and algae, each covering different gaps. Flavor might matter more than anyone expects after months of repetitive meals. People don't survive on calories alone. Mental survival might be harder to engineer than oxygen. Early settlers would see the same walls, hear the same machines, and meet the same handful of faces every day, while a beautiful landscape sat permanently out of reach outside the airlock. Crew selection would weigh personality as heavily as technical skill. Brilliant people can still become dangerous teammates once exhaustion sets in. Even culture would drift. The Martian year lasts 687 days, so birthdays, holidays, and sleep schedules would slowly separate from Earth's calendar. Medicine exposes that distance most brutally. A crew could never carry a full hospital or a specialist for every emergency. A bad appendix or an internal injury could become a mission-level threat. Surgery might happen with advice arriving from doctors millions of kilometers away and many minutes late. There would be no ambulance coming from Earth. So, could humans actually live on Mars? For a limited mission, probably yes. Pressurized habitats can already hold air. Recycling systems can already recover water. Machines can already make oxygen, grow plants, and block part of the radiation. Robots can already deliver supplies before anyone arrives. None of that makes it easy. Together, it makes survival physically possible. Permanent settlement is a much harder claim, because the real problem was never reaching Mars. It's building a civilization that doesn't need Earth anymore. A base resupplied constantly from Earth isn't truly independent. Its people stay alive only because another planet keeps shipping medicine, tools, and parts across the gap between worlds. Real self-sufficiency would demand mining, manufacturing, agriculture, and medicine all running locally, a transformation that could take decades or generations. A tiny population can't hold every skill and safeguard a civilization needs, and more people simply demand more food, power, and space in return. The first Martian city would start out looking nothing like a city, just a fragile chain of add-ons wrapped around one reliable shelter, each new module adding capability and one more thing that could fail. Terraforming often gets imagined as the final escape from all that dependence. Warm the planet, thicken the air, and finally walk outside without a suit. In 2018, planetary scientists Bruce Jakosky and Christopher Edwards ran the numbers and found the dream doesn't hold up. Mars simply doesn't have enough accessible carbon dioxide to warm itself with any technology available today. Even a warmer Mars would still lack breathable air and a magnetic shield. Building a new atmosphere would be an engineering project beyond anything humanity has ever attempted. So forget an Earth like Mars glowing green under an open sky. The realistic future looks like a network of sealed habitats scattered across a world that stays lethal indefinitely. Nobody would conquer Mars by making the planet harmless. Survival there would come from stacking layer after layer of protection between that hostile world and a fragile human body. Living on Mars would end up teaching us less about escaping Earth than about everything Earth quietly does for us already. Air, pressure, warmth, water, gravity, all arriving here for free without a single machine involved. On Mars, every one of those gifts would have to be rebuilt, monitored, and repaired by hand forever. Call the first Martian home a house, and you'd be describing it wrong. It would really be a machine large enough for people to live inside. If those systems keep working, humans may one day wake under a genuine Martian sunrise and build families and laboratories under the red dust. Humans can live on Mars. Mars itself will never keep them alive.